Welcome to today's Explainer. We are embarking on a truly fascinating academic journey, bridging the ancient texts of Maharishi Charak with the incredibly rigorous frameworks of modern zoology. We're going to map out the entire animal kingdom, decode the evolutionary history of millions of species, and explore a profound connection between ancient Indian science and modern biology, something that honestly often gets left out of standard textbooks. So grab your notebooks and get ready, because we're jumping into a fast-paced, deeply structured exploration of the very grammar of life itself.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with ancient taxonomy and ecology, then move into Dashavatar, encoded evolution. After that, we'll dive into the grammar of life, blueprints of body design, the phylum marathon, and finally, vertebrates and disease vectors. 6 core sections, and every single one is a crucial piece of this grand biological puzzle.
All right, Section 1, Ancient Taxonomy and Ecology. We're starting deep in antiquity with the 27th chapter of the Charak Samhita, which reveals an incredibly advanced ecological taxonomy.
It's actually amazing how well these ancient Sanskrit habitat observations translate straight into our modern phyla equivalents. Thousands of years ago, Maharishi Charak wasn't just listing random animals. He was categorizing them by their ecological niches. Varishaya referred to entirely aquatic creatures, which lines up perfectly with modern aquatic arthropods and mollusks like crabs or oysters. Bhumishaya identified creatures living in underground burrows, essentially matching our modern understanding of nematodes. And Pratuda perfectly captured creatures that peck or sting to feed, like certain birds and insects. This wasn't just a basic list, It was highly practical, applied ecological science.
Think about how we map energy flow today. Ancient Ayurveda intuitively mapped out what we'd immediately recognize as the modern ecological food chain. They understood that diet fundamentally shapes an organism's biological characteristics. By grouping organisms into primary consumers dependent on plants, active hunters, opportunistic scavengers, and tissue-feeding parasites, ancient scholars essentially sketched out the exact same energy flowcharts you'd find in a university ecology textbook right now.
Now, what's really fascinating is this ancient concept of Krimi. This acts as a remarkably accurate piece of ancient microbiology. They distinguished between bahya, which were external parasites clinging to skin and hair, what we now call arthropoda ectoparasites, like lice. And then there's abhyantar, the internal pathogens thriving in the stomach or blood. This maps flawlessly to endoparasites like platyhelminthes, your tapeworms, and ashamanthes, your roundworms. The sheer clinical awareness of human pathogen interaction they had back then is just outstanding. Moving right along to Section 2, Dashavatar, Encoded Evolution. Let's explore how ancient mythology might actually serve as an encoded timeline for biological evolution.
You might be wondering how mythology fits into all this. Well, the avatars of Vishnu actually mirror the geological and Darwinian timeline almost perfectly. Matsya, the fish, marks our aquatic origins. Kurma, the tortoise, represents that crucial evolutionary leap to amphibians. Varaha, the boar, symbolizes complete terrestrial mammalian adaptation. Then we hit Narsimha, the half-man, half-beast, which is a perfect representation of transitional hominids. Moving forward, Parashurama, wielding an axe, represents the massive cognitive leap into bipedal tool-making humans. And finally, Kalki is often viewed by modern researchers as a metaphor for an ultimate future technological singularity. It's not just a fringe theory either. Even J.B.S. Haldane, a giant in evolutionary biology, openly appreciated how strikingly accurate this vertebrate outline is when hidden within ancient narratives. It kind of makes you wonder, were these stories an ingenious encoded data storage system, a way to preserve advanced biological and geological observations across millennia? So what happens when we view these two worldviews side by side? It highlights a fascinating philosophical collision. While both timelines align chronologically, their underlying philosophies couldn't be more different. On one hand, you have neo-Darwinism, which dictates a blind, goalless survival of the fittest, driven purely by random mutation. In contrast, the Avatoric model argues for a purposeful, cosmic drive, pushing life forward, not just toward physical survival, but toward higher cognitive and spiritual consciousness. It is a brilliant academic clash between pure biology and cosmic philosophy. Okay, Section 3, the grammar of life. Let's pivot to modern zoology and unpack the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature, or ICZN.
These are definitely not just random rules. This is the very grammar of life, ensuring that scientists all over the globe speak the exact same systematic language. Take the principle of priority. If Carl Linnaeus named the domestic cat Felis catus back in 1758 and someone else named it Felis sylvestris 50 years later, the oldest name wins. Period. The rest are just tossed out as junior synonyms. And here's a highly surprising fact for you. Because zoology and botany rules operate completely independently, you could literally have a fig tree named Ficus and an entirely unrelated snail also named Ficus, and it's perfectly valid.
Now, scientific names aren't just abstract ideas floating around in a textbook. They require a physical anchor. That's the holotype. It's the ultimate gold standard. When a brand new species is named, there's a specific, preserved jar or display in a museum somewhere on Earth that holds the exact physical specimen that specific name belongs to.
But what if the unthinkable happens? Say, a museum tragically burns down and the holotype is lost. Science demands absolute certainty, so the system doesn't just collapse. Instead, a neotype is carefully selected from the wild to replace that lost anchor. It's a brilliant safeguard, ensuring this universal biological language never breaks down over future disputes.
Next up is Section 4, Blueprints of Body Design. We're looking at the architectural blueprints that dictate how we classify species based on their physical structures. The evolution of bilateral symmetry was a massive, literal game changer. It allowed animals to develop actual heads and move rapidly in one direction. Before this, creatures basically just sat around or floated aimlessly. With a front-facing head, which we call cephalization, came directional movement and hunting. On top of that, developing a true body cavity or column wasn't just about protecting internal organs. In creatures like earthworms, the fluid trapped inside this cavity acts as a hydrostatic skeleton, creating the internal pressure they absolutely need to burrow and move.
Here's where things get wild. Early in embryonic development, there's a split that divides the entire animal kingdom. When an embryo first forms, it develops a tiny opening called a blastopore. In protostomes, like your insects and worms, this opening becomes the mouth. But in deuterostomes, which includes humans, this hole becomes the anus first and the mouth forms later. Even more amazingly, early deuterostome cells feature indeterminate cleavage, meaning they are highly flexible and unassigned. If they split apart early on, each half can grow into a complete separate organism. That's exactly why humans can have identical twins.
All right, focus in, because we're hitting Section 5, the phylum marathon, tracking the incredible buildup of biological complexity. We're going to track the step-by-step milestones of evolution, starting at the ground floor. We begin with Porifera, the sponges, which are just loose collections of cells. Then Coleanterata, like jellyfish, invent true tissues and stinging cells. Platyhelminthes bring in that bilateral symmetry we just talked about. Aschelminthenes figure out a complete digestive tract with both a mouth and an anus. And then Annelida achieve true metamerism, meaning a genuinely segmented body along with a closed blood system. It's literally watching Mother Nature slowly figure out how to build a complex machine.
Then the complexity explodes. Arthropods practically own the planet thanks to their indestructible chitin armor. Echinoderms, like starfish, hunt using a mind-blowing hydraulic water system. They literally pump water to move their arms. And then we hit the big leagues. Chordata. This is our club. Defined by a hollow nerve cord, a notochord, and gill slits at some stage of development, this is the architectural peak of the animal kingdom.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, Vertebrates and Disease Vectors, exploring higher-order animals and the vectors that impact our lives.
This is where we see the ultimate progression in complexity. From the jawless, sucking mouths of cyclostomata, we move up to the terrifying cartilaginous frames of sharks. Then, true bones develop in osteichthyes, followed by that massive evolutionary leap onto land by amphibians and reptiles. Finally, the ultimate temperature control mechanisms evolve in birds and mammals, completely changing how and where life could survive on Earth.
Before we wrap up, we have to talk about complete metamorphosis, because it's honestly mind-blowing. We see this in insects like butterflies. Inside that pupa, the larva doesn't just grow wings. It basically dissolves into a biological soup. Its old tissues are entirely dismantled and completely reorganized into an adult structure. It is, without a doubt, one of the most magical and violently complex transformations in all of biology. And we can't talk about complexity without acknowledging the microscopic organisms that profoundly impact human health. They literally dictate global health dynamics. You have protozoans like Leishmania carried by sandflies, and trypanosoma transmitted by the tsetse fly. Crucially, notice Wuchereria. Unlike the others, this is a nematode, a microscopic worm, delivered by mosquitoes, causing the horrific swelling of elephantiasis, and of course, Plasmodium, the protozoan architect of malaria. Understanding zoological classification is quite literally a matter of life and death when we are battling these vectors.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We are not separate from nature. We are a beautifully complex piece of this ancient, ongoing biological puzzle. By understanding our shared embryonic traits with simple marine creatures, and bridging that with the profound ecological foresight of ancient thinkers like Maharishi Charak, we get a beautifully unified picture. We are tied to the earth, to the water, and to every other species we've explored today through the strict, relentless grammar of life. Doesn't it completely change how you view humanity's place in nature? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning your place in this incredible biological web.